Welcome back, everyone, for another episode inside the story time. And today we are going to cover one specific story, but two different angles. Really, what today's story is going to be about is about the Wolf's Lair. If you're not familiar with this, the first part will go into some detail of what the Wolf's Lair is, but the gist of it is Hitler's headquarters. So it's the Fuhrer's headquarters in World War II. So we're going to be talking about that a little bit today, and so we'll talk more about that. And then I also have two stories to go along with it that are either widely known or not really known so much anymore. Took me a bit to find them. I knew one of them from living in Germany myself a little over a decade ago now, and really just being a big history buff as well. And World War II is always that one that I really enjoy reading about, mostly because I have family that served during that time frame back then. So without further ado, let's discuss the Wolf Slayer. As always, if you're into stories about like the nitty gritty, the dark and weird, the horror stories, missing person, true crime, all types of stories, make sure you hit that subscribe button. You also hit the like button as well, so where you can stay up to date with everything. And then also don't forget that bell icon. Make sure you smash it and it's turned on so we actually get notified every Monday when these videos go live. Now, without further ado, let's get into it, shall we? The Wolfslayer served as Adolf Hitler's first Eastern Front military headquarters in World War II. The organization Tot constructed the complex, which became one of several of the Fuhrer's headquarters in various parts of Central and Eastern Europe for the start of Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of Soviet Union in 1941. The top secret high security site laid in the Masurian woods, about 8 kilometers, about 5 miles east of the small East Prussian town of Ratzenburg, which is in Poland, present-day Poland. 3 security zones surrounded the central complex where the Fuhrer's bunker was located. These were guarded by the personnel handpicked by the Fuhrer himself within the SS Legion. Despite this security, the most notable event to take place there was the assassination attempt against Hitler on July 20th, 1944, which is then known as the event of 20 July plot. We'll get more into that soon. Hitler first arrived in the quarter on 23 June 1941. The total he spent more than 800 days at the Wolfslayer during a 3.5 year period until his final departure on 20 November 1944. In mid-1944, work began to enlarge and reinforce many of the Wolfslayer's original building. The work was never completed because of the rapid advance of the Red Army during the Baltic offensive in the late 1944s. On 25 January 1945, the complex was blown up and abandoned 48 hours before the arrival of the Soviet Union. The name itself, I'm going to possibly butcher this, I'm so sorry for it, but Wolfschanz, which is derived from Wolf, a self-adopted nickname of Hitler. He began using the nickname in the early 1930s, and it was often how he was addressed by those in his intimate circle. Wolf was used in several titles of Hitler's headquarters throughout occupied Europe, such as Wolfschutz 1 and 2 in Belgium and France, and Werewolf in Ukraine. Although the standard translation in English is Wolf's Lair, a Schanz, I'm butchering that, I'm so sorry, in German denotes a sconce or redoubt of temporary field work. The layout itself is also important to note, so we're going to touch on that really quick. The decision was made in late 1940 to build the Wolfslayer in the middle of a forest far from major roads and urban areas. The 6.5 kilometer square, or 2.5 square miles, complex was completed by 21 June 1941, consisted of 3 concentric security zones. About 2,000 people lived and worked at the Wolf's Lair at its peak, among them 20 women, some of whom were required to sample Hitler's food to test for poison. We have a story about that. The installation were served by a nearby airfield and railway line. Buildings within the complex were camouflaged with brush, grass, and artificial trees on the flat roofs. Netting was also erected between buildings and the surrounding forest, so the installation looked like unbroken, dense woodland from the air. A facility for Army's headquarters was also located near Wolf's Lair complex. The FBK and RSD had responsibilities for Hitler's personal security within the Wolf's Lair, while external protection of the complex was provided by the FBB, which had become a regiment by July 1944. The FBB was equipped with tanks, anti-aircraft guns, and other heavy weapons. Any approaching aircraft would be detected up to 100 kilometers away, 60 miles, from the Wolf's Lair. Additional troops were also stationed about 75 kilometers, 45 miles away from the location. Hitler's secretary, Schrad Jung, I butchered that, I'm so sorry, recalled that Hitler repeatedly spoke in the late 1943s and early 1944 of a possible bomber attack on the Wolf Lair by the Western Allies. She quoted Hitler as saying, "They know exactly where we are, and sometime they're going to destroy everything here with carefully aimed bombs. I expect them to attack any day now." According to Speer, between 28 July 1941 and 20 March 1942, Hitler left the Ratzenberg only 4 times for a total of 57 days. Afterwards, Hitler spent the next 3 months in Obersalzberg before returning to Ratzenberg for the next 9 months. Hitler's entourage returned to the Wolf Lair for an extended summer stay at the Berghof in July 1944. The previous small bunkers had been replaced by heavy colossal structures of reinforced concrete as a defense against a feared air attack. According to Armaments Minister Albert Speer, some 36 million marks were spent for the bunker in Ratzenberg and the Wolf Lair. Hitler's bunker became the largest positive fortress containing a maze of passages, rooms, and halls. Jung wrote, "We had an air raid warning every day in the period between the 20 July assassination attempt and Hitler's final departure from the Wolf Lair in November of 1944. But there was never more than a single aircraft circling over the forest, and no bombs were ever dropped. All the same, Hitler took the danger very serious and thought the reconnaissance flights were in preparation for the big raid that he was expecting. No air attacks ever came. It has never been revealed whether the Western Allies even knew of the Wolf Lair and its location and its importance. The Soviet Union was unaware of both the location and the scale of the complex until it's uncovered by their forces in their advance towards Berlin in the early 1945. By the summer of 1944, a sizable portion of the German populace, including a number of Germany's senior military leaders, were beginning to lose hope that Germany could ever win the war. Many blamed Hitler for leading Germany to disaster. Several notable politicians and senior military officials hatched a plot to assassinate the Fuhrer by planting a bomb during a meeting at the Wolf's Lair, and by doing so to trigger a political consolidation and coup. The plan was known as Operation Valkyrie. The idea was that once Hitler was dead, the military would claim that the assassination was part of an attempted coup by the Nazi Party, and the reserved army would seize key installations in Berlin and arrest high-ranking Nazi leadership. A new government would be established with Karl Friedrich Goldler, oh, I butchered that. I'm sorry, as Chancellor of Germany and Ludwig Beck as president. The new government had the aim of negotiating an end to the war, preferably with favorable terms for Germany, of course. According to Philip Feher von Boslugger, one of the last surviving members of the July plot, the motivation of the key conspirators varied. For many of them, it was simply a way to avoid military defeat, while others wanted to salvage at least a part of the country's morality. They selected a young German army colonel by the name of Klaus von Stauffenberg to carry out the attempt. Stauffenberg was a committed German nationalist despite not being an official Nazi party member. He ultimately came to believe that it was his patriotic duty to rid Germany of Adolf Hitler if the country was to be saved. However, Hitler was no stranger to assassination attempts. Since the late 1930s and his meteoric rise to the top of Germany's political scene, assassination attempts against him had become somewhat routine. Growing increasingly paranoid, Hitler's routinely changed his schedule at the last minute with no prior notice to anyone. On July 20th, 1944, Stauffenberg arrived to the bunker at the Wolf's Lair. The conspirators had counted on the meeting taking place in a concrete windowless underground bunker sealed by heavy steel doors. By ensuring it took place in such a facility, the blast would be contained and the shrapnel would instantly kill anyone within proximity of the explosive device. According to Pierre Galante's Operation Valkyrie, the German general's plot against Hitler, which is a book, July 20 was an unbearably hot day, and the meeting planners decided to move the meeting to a wooden bunker above ground, which had greater air circulation. The room had numerous windows as well as a wooden table and other decorative pieces of furniture, meaning the potential explosion would be significantly reduced as the energy of the blast would just be absorbed and dissipated. Even though Stauffenberg knew this was the case, he pushed forward, believing that 2 bombs would still be adequate enough to level the room and kill anyone inside of it. When he arrived, Stauffenberg excused himself to a private chamber with the premise of having to change his shirt. He needed to prime and arm the 2 explosive devices. However, an unexpected phone call, as well as a hurried knocking on his door, meant that he only had time to arm one of the 2 devices. The potential for a larger burst was thus reduced in half. Stauffenberg understood that, as a result, the explosive device had to be as close to Hitler as possible in order to do any sort of damage. Under the pretext that his hearing was damaged because of his injuries, he was able to secure a seat as close to Hitler as possible, with only one other person in between him and the Fuhrer. Stauffenberg placed the suitcase as close to Hitler as he could, and under the pretext of a personal phone call, exited the room. In the interim, another official took his seat and unwittingly moved the briefcase to a position on the other side of a heavy wooden leg support, the meeting room table. At precisely 12:42 p.m., the bomb detonated and a panic ensued. A stenographer was instantly killed and 20 people were injured, including 3 official officers who later perished from their wounds. Believing that Hitler was truly dead, Stauffenberg and his aide Werner von Haften jumped into a staff car and bluffed their way past 3 separate military checkpoints to escape the chaos at the Wolf Lair complex. But Hitler, along with everyone else shielded by the heavy wooden table leg, survived with just a few minor scrapes and a perforated eardrum. His trousers were completely tattered, and the Nazi leadership would later use photographs of the pants as part of a propaganda campaign. According to historian Ian Kershaw, conflicting reports arrived that the fate of Hitler during the explosion. Despite the confusion, the Reserve Army began arresting high-ranking Nazi leaderships in Berlin. However, delays and lack of clear communication, along with the broadcasting of the fact that Hitler was alive, ultimately unraveled the entire plan. That same night, General Friedrich Fromm convened an impromptu court-martial and sentenced all of the conspirators to death. Ludwig Beck committed suicide, while Stauffenberg and von Hoften and Ulbricht and another officer, Albrecht Merz von Kernheim, were executed by a makeshift firing squad in the courtyard of Binderblock. Stauffenberg's brother Berthold was slowly strangled at the Plötzensee prison in Berlin, while the entire ordeal was filmed for Hitler's viewing pleasure. Several factors playing in concrete ended up being decisive in saving Hitler's life that day, but the conspirators were correct that Germany was on its way to defeat. The Nazi leaders and his closest aides died by suicide less than a year later after this attack. Every meal could have been her last, and when she was finished eating the bland vegetarian dishes put before her, the 25-year-old Margot Wolke and her young female colleagues would burst into tears and cry like dogs because they were so grateful to still be alive. Margot Wolke was no Nazi, but she was one of 15 young women who were employed by Adolf Hitler in his heavily guarded Prussian Wolf Lair headquarters during the Second World War. Her job, along with the other 14 young women, was simply to taste the Nazi leader's food before it reached his lips to make sure it wasn't poisoned. She was the only one to survive. However, all of her colleagues were rounded up and shot by the advancing Red Army in January of 1945. Now a frail 96-year-old widow, Margot Wolke has overcome her feelings of shame and has broken decades of silence about her time as Hitler's food tester to tell her story. The food was always vegetarian. There was a constant rumor that the British were out to poison Hitler. He never ate meat. We were given rice, noodles, peppers, peas, and cauliflowers. Some of the girls started to shed tears as they began eating because they were so afraid. But we had to eat it all up. Then we had to wait an hour, and every time we were so frightened that we were going to be ill. We used to cry like dogs because we were so glad to have survived. Miss Wolke told her story in the same Berlin apartment where she was born in 1917. The daughter of a German railway employee, she enjoyed a carefree youth and had Jewish friends until the Nazis came to power in 1933. She became one of Hitler's food tasters by complete accident. Bombed out of her Berlin apartment in 1941, and with her husband Karl drafted into the army, she sought sanctuary in the home of his mother in the East Prussian town of Parchs, which is now Parks, Poland. I butchered that. I'm so sorry, Poland. Located some 400 miles east of Berlin, the town happened to be right next door to Hitler's Wolf Lair, his headquarters. The mayor of the town, an ardent Nazi, forced Miss Wolke to become a food tester. Every day an SS guard would pick her up and the other girls up in a special bus and took them to a school building where they had to taste the Nazis' leaders' meals. The security was so tight that she never saw Hitler in person. She only saw his Alsatian dog, Blondie. Security was draconian, but one night she was sexually assaulted by an SS officer. Hitler's fears for his life were not unfounded. On July 20th, 1944, a group of German army officers attempted to assassinate the Nazi leader by detonating a bomb in the Wolf Lair. She says, "We were sitting on a wooden bench and suddenly we heard and felt the incredible bang. We fell off the benches and heard someone shouting, "Hitler is dead!" But of course he wasn't, as Miss Volk retold. Nearly 5,000 German suspects of involvement in that bomb plot were executed by the Nazis. Miss Volk was forced to move into a heavily guarded building where she tasted Hitler's food. In the late 1944, the Red Army was advancing, and Miss Volk was helped to escape by a friendly SS officer. She was found a place on a train used by Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels and fled to Berlin in ruins. Berlin catapulted to the Russian army in May of 1945, but the horror of the war did not end for Margot Wolke. She states, "We tried to dress up as old women, but the Russians came for me and the other girls all the same." She recalled, "They cut open our dresses and dragged us into a doctor's flat. We were held there and assaulted for 14 days. It was just pure hell on earth. The nightmares still never go away." Miss Volk was left unable to bear children. She says, "I always wanted a daughter. When I reached 50, I thought if I had a daughter, she'd be 25 by now. But sadly, that never happened for me." A British officer called Norman helped her recover. He went back to Britain after the war. He wrote asking his German girlfriend to join him, but Miss Volk told him she wanted to wait and find out if her husband Karl was still alive. In 1946, Karl appeared on his doorstep, finally allowed home from a Soviet prisoner of war camp. He weighed only 45 kilos, had a bandage around his head, and was at first unrecognizable to her. The couple tried to live a normal life, but the war had taken a toll on both of them. Margot Wolke couldn't escape her nightmares. They separated, and Karl died about 24 years ago. Miss Volk has lived alone with her memories ever since. Now, I really hope you enjoyed the type of story, and it's a little bit on the darker side for some of it, and a lot of people don't know a lot of stuff that happened in World War II, and that's for many reasons, especially nowadays. But the fact of the matter that World War II was such just a devastating time, and I of course wasn't there. I'm not old enough to have lived through it, but hearing stories from family members and family friends and just other people in general, and doing a bunch of research, like, it's such a horrific time, and a lot of people either don't want to believe or forget that Germany, Hitler specifically, not only tortured a bunch of Jews and blacks and Catholics, and really just anybody he felt like, but he also did stuff where he held people prisoners, like those 15 young women who did taste testing and other stuff for him. And those girls had no say whatsoever. They couldn't do anything about it. And a lot of people tend to forget that as well. While World War II is probably the most renowned thing that people will remember ever about World War II is the Holocaust, and that alone is there's no words. It's such a terrible, terrible stain on their history, but as well as just the history of man and the fact that such evil lived at that time. But as you can see, though, Operation Valkyrie, the suitcase bomb to kill Hitler, had everything on its plan. Who knows how the war would have turned out? It's all hearsay for now. But even within his own party, you can tell people were already against Hitler and trying to take him out from the inside. It didn't really happen now, did it? But yeah, such a messed up time. And the Wolf's Lair is one of those locations that a lot of people don't seem to really know about. And if they know, they've heard the name. That's about the extent of it. But if you want to find out more, you really can just simply Google the Wolf's Lair, World War II, or Hitler's headquarters, or Führer's headquarters, or Adolf Hitler's headquarters, Nazis' headquarters, whatever, and you'll find it. And there's tons of stories more to go along with that. And just kind of be aware that they're not always great stories. And what I mean by that is they are very hard to read, just because the uncomfortableness of the situation that some of these people were put into. Such as that last story, I couldn't even read the full story because it dealt with a lot of sexual assaults and other stuff. Um, so I had to leave a lot of the information out due to that, and the fact that it's going to be up on YouTube. So, but regardless, neither here nor there, y'all. I hope you had a fantastic time watching this. And as always, if you enjoy these type of stories, if you enjoy stories just in general, or paranormal, or mythical, or legendary, or dark and gritty and scary and horrific, or even jovially, ignore that last word, even happy stories, which we are getting there, then make sure you smash that subscribe button, like this video, and hit that bell icon so where you can be notified when I go and upload another video. They're going to be uploaded every Monday at 8 a.m. Central Standard Time. And until then, if you have any ideas or you want to reach out to me about a specific story or video or whatever, just let me know either in the comments, or you can hit me up over on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook even, all under the 6th hour. So, but until next time, everyone, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I do greatly appreciate it. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Until next time, take care.